Okay, step 4, evaluate the premises. So you know from step 3 that the argument is valid. And that means if the premises are true, the conclusion must also be true. But you don't know, are the premises true? That's what evaluating the premises means. You're basically determining whether or not we have good reason to think that the premises are true. This is not meant to be a superhuman task. It's supposed to be something that you think of pragmatically. You can just look at each premise in isolation and you ask the question, would any relevant expert disagree with this statement? That's the question you want to answer. Sometimes that'll require that you do some empirical research, or you do some research into other papers that have done empirical research to see if any relevant experts would disagree with the claim that you're making. So if your premise is an empirical one, you're going to do that kind of work. But if your premise is arguing for a kind of philosophical link, say you have a modus ponens and you say if P then Q, well, to evaluate that premise, you're trying to establish that there's genuinely that link between P and Q, and that often involves conceptual work. So you'll want to see, for example, if there's any relevant philosophical work that's tried to show that that specific connection between this specific P and this specific Q is something that holds. And in addition to asking if any relevant expert would disagree with a statement, you should also treat your own imagination as a repository of relevant experts. That's often what we're doing in philosophy. We're really thinking about all the possibilities when we're evaluating a premise. We're just in our own mind trying to reflect on all the things that could possibly be the case. And so you're often treating your own mind as a kind of relevant expert if you're evaluating the truth of a premise. And that's a totally legitimate thing to do in a lot of cases. If the premise doesn't hang, for example, on empirical facts, then it's totally valid to consult your own philosophical intuitions to figure out if the premise is true or not. So if all relevant experts would agree with the statement, keep the premise in your reconstruction, right? So if all the experts that you can find would agree with it, and you haven't thought of anything, right, when you're treating your own imagination as a repository of experts, and you haven't thought of anything that sort of makes you think that you should reject this premise, then you can keep it as it is. And if some relevant expert would disagree with the statement, then you should consider revising it to make it less controversial. That might make it relatively less faithful to the original author's intent, but again, you're trying to balance fidelity with charity. You want to be as faithful to the passage as you can be, but you also want to make it as strong as possible. That's the basic process, and I think you're going to find that once you put some effort into it, you're going to get good at it, and you'll find that it's actually a very useful skill, something that you can use not just in this module, but in all your modules to come. Thanks for your time and attention.